Welcome back. We're going to try something new today, a little bit of audiobook. So, first chapter of John and my new book is called How to Endurance. So, I'm going to read that for you so you can listen in. And hopefully, if you enjoy it, you can head over to our Substack and join either the free list or the paid list. So, that picture is a reminder that the role of time is often overlooked in endurance training. Many of the benchmark sets are short durations, but the races themselves are long. And we're going to get to that as the fourth framework. So our goal is to explain how you can become better than you ever thought possible. And we want you to get there and stay there for the rest of your life. To help you, we've written 4 frameworks for viewing your endurance training. Number 1 is basic fitness. Number 2 is metabolics. Number 3 is work capacity. And number 4 is time. Each framework builds on the capacities of the prior one. The first framework is lifelong basic fitness. This is core training for health and functional performance. This type of fitness gives the ability to ramp up for longer events or prepare specifically for shorter events. It supports ease of movement generally, as well as ensuring capacity for activities of daily living. The second framework is the foundational aspect of metabolic fitness. At its most simple, it's the ability to turn food into speed. In the medical world, metabolic fitness relates to the absence of disease, in particular chronic diseases like cardiovascular diseases and diabetes. This means that metabolic health is related to nutrition, exercise, mental health, cardiovascular, respiratory, hormonal, and mitochondrial health. But metabolic health can also be seen as the ratio between substrate utilization and oxygen consumption at a cellular level. In a later chapter, we will show how to test this with lactate testing, which is a good way of looking at and testing for functional metabolic health in the athlete, even if it's a bit limited. The third framework is work capacity. As Rocky Balboa says, going the distance. Our final framework is the role of time. This is the ability to choose, change, and sustain pace across our race duration. Our favorite time-based concept is training the ability to always finish strong. Together, the frameworks offer us a sustainable approach towards a lifetime enjoyment of endurance sport. Along your endurance journey, you will wonder, am I doing the right thing? When that question arises, refer back to what's essential. Do work. Am I training consistently? Enjoy the process. Do I enjoy my life structure? Endure. Is my workload sustainable? Correct errors. Do I have a system for better decision making? We are going to start with what's essential, an approach that will keep you in the game for many years to come. Doc Hellemans on consistency. Are you prepared to do the work consistently? Consistency is the key, but it is okay to bring variety into the consistency. It is more likely you will do the work if you mostly enjoy it. If it feels like a chore sometimes, that is fine. If it feels like a chore most of the time, you need to change something. Sustainability is the key. Although it is fine to adjust the workload over time, depending on other commitments, without feeling guilty. Use periodization across the year to bring variety in consistency. Recognize and correct errors also relates to what-if scenarios. Being flexible is important. Some basic knowledge of training principles will help with decision making. Being fixated on training and getting it done regardless will be detrimental over time. The first framework, basic fitness. The first task is creating a life structure that enables 12 hours per week of movement. We want you to remember, all movement is good. Everything counts. There is no minimum intensity. We don't need structure when we start out. We simply need to move frequently. As you'll read later, Gordo likes to ensure 2 back-to-back easy days each week. So you might consider 5 days a week, 2 hours of movement, 2 days a week, 1 hour of movement. Things to remember. Health supports performance. Across your endurance journey, there will be times when you will be tempted to trade health for race performance. We hope to help you make better decisions. Areas of risk. There are times when what's required to race well diverges from health. The race itself, when we go deep, and when we get out of our comfort zone. Short-term compromises. In preparing to race, we compromise our health to a degree, even if it's usually short-term. In return, we get an incredible amount of satisfaction by finding out how far we can push ourselves, rightly or wrongly. So in pursuit of our goals, at times, we might well need to be prepared to compromise our health. But as long as it is not long-term and we recognize and manage it, this is where recovery comes in, we feel that is acceptable. Atrial fibrillation. In John's early to mid-60s, he suffered from atrial fibrillation, AF or AFib. Endurance athletes have 4 to 7 times the chance to develop AF compared to the general population, although he did not know that at the time. John doesn't think he would have done anything differently if he had known, as the satisfaction he achieved around racing and exploring his limits was worth the risk. Ironman. When we do Ironman distance triathlons, it is generally not considered a healthy activity, in particular when we do it under extreme weather conditions. When we do a race and our body screams stop, but we carry on anyways because we know the pain will finish soon, it's not considered healthy. Finally, there is no destination. Being athletic is its own reward. We are writing this book to help you feel better today and every day. Hold this value close to your heart. It's what will remain when you're on the far side of your athletic peak. Endurance training entails a gradual but radical redesign of the modern lifestyle. A rule of thumb: our true time commitment is double our training hours. What do we mean by that? 2 things. First, life happens. We need space in our lives for contingencies arising. Second, to fully benefit from our work, we need to improve 3 aspects of our non-training lives. Number 1, sleep, a consistent wake-up time without an alarm. Number 2, nutrition, take time to prepare real food. And number 3, empty space, under-schedule ourselves. You might be thinking, how the heck am I going to carve out 24 hours from my already busy week? First up, gradually. Sustainable change is incremental. Next, methodically. Every action is a choice. Finally, wisely. Certain choices are clearly suboptimal. Start by replacing them. Unsure what I mean? Many of us have a choice available that can improve sleep and nutrition while creating space. Stop drinking alcohol. Maybe you don't drink. Start by targeting the one choice with the greatest positive return. Replace one thing at a time. The next section is a basic template. Our core program needs 4 components. Number 1, endurance, mostly green zone. Number 2, strength, a consistent maintenance of the force component of fitness. Number 3, agility, balance, and skill. Number 4, mobility and prehabilitation. There's overlap between the categories, and athletes tend to pick favorites. In building your program, notice your preferences. We find it helps to schedule our least favorite sessions. When it comes to agility and mobility, a little is far better than none. Then there's a table that John's put together, which is the subjective perception chart. And it runs through zones 1 to 5. And those are zone 1, easy. Zone 2, steady. Together they make the green zone. Zone 3, moderately hard. And zone 4 and zone 5, which are the red zone, hard and very hard intensities. We're going to be covering those in a later chapter in much more detail on training zones. Endurance dose. The underlying premise of this book is you want our opinion about what it takes to become very good at endurance sport. So what's it going to take? The time commitment of an elite athlete is completely impractical for most. Long-distance elite triathletes train between 20 and 30 hours per week, and the amateurs 12 to 20 hours per week. Standard distance elite triathletes train between 20 and 25 hours per week, and the amateurs 8 to 15 hours per week. That's the first lesson of sport. Most people can't fit the training into their lives. Even if we can do it, how can we recover from it? Most can't. Create a life to fit the work, and you'll be ahead of most. Invert what I just said. Our optimal training program is the one that fits comfortably into our existing life situation. Want more training? Start by creating more space. Fortunately, we can make significant gains with a smaller time commitment than an elite, one that enables success in other areas of our lives. Start with 12 hours. Allocate 9 of those hours to endurance. Target metabolic health with 8 of those hours. We explain metabolic fitness below. The other hour can include all your peppy work. Never trade volume for intensity. The endurance work is what we call green zone volume. It builds us up, is comfortable, and is repeatable day in and day out. Peppy is all the training above the green zone. Its nature changes based on the time of year and the event we are targeting. There will be times when we need to allocate more time to our specific preparation. The 8-to-1 ratio, green versus everything else, is the guideline. When our training mix swings away from the 8-to-1 ratio, it's a temporary shift. Here's another reality. The 12-hour-a-week athlete should focus on races under 2 hours duration. There is enough chronic volume to perform well at these. There is a reduced competitive disadvantage to the higher volume athletes. That said, the time we have to train does not impact human physiology, and what happens when we're not training has a big impact on our performance. The above is worth restating. We can't hack endurance performance via intensity. The low-intensity work requires time. The time spent building low-end capacity directly impacts the gains we receive from higher intensity work. Sleep, nutrition, and the absence of stress have an outsized impact on training response. To boost training response, seek to improve what's happening when we're not training. Next is a sample endurance allocation. How might we allocate the 9 hours for a multisport athlete? Start with 3, 3, 3 in each sport. The sessions. Swim 3 times for 45 minutes, bike 3 times for 90 minutes, and run 3 times for 45 minutes. By combining workouts, the week might look like this. 4 days of 90 minutes, 1 day of 3 hours. Where's the long run? Well, we could create a long session by placing it at the end of a 45-minute swim, a 90-minute bike, and a 45-minute run. That's one heck of a big day for most people. You may find you need to run first or second in order. You'll almost certainly find you'll need to adjust your definition of easy downwards. All training is a compromise. The above outline is a proven starting point. We are going to get into much greater detail later. We link to the basic week approach, big day training, running, the multisport marathoner, cycling, and swimming. All these sections are available on the Endurance Essentials Substack in the table of contents. When doing 3-3-3, 3 sessions per discipline per week, give yourself the option of brick sessions to save time. A brick is a combination workout, bike, then run typically. If preparing for a triathlon, then do at least one combined discipline session per week. For example, Monday, swim. Tuesday, bike with a short run off the bike. Wednesday, run. Thursday, swim. Friday, bike. Saturday, swim, bike, and run. And keep Sunday as a family day. There are many variations on this theme. A sidebar with John's experience. I have never prescribed the same program to the hundreds of athletes I have seen, from beginners to elite, and always negotiated their programs with their lifestyle in mind. These days, I also apply the 3-3-3 principle for myself, even if I have a bit more time, because recovery takes much longer. So it's good advice for older athletes regardless. Next section is strength dosed. Before you start, consider strong for what? Force generation, injury prevention, lean body mass preservation, connective tissue strength, force production at specific joint angles, work over time, gaining muscle mass. There's so much to think about. Don't think, do. Start with 30 minutes twice a week. Mix it up. Always include a compound leg exercise. When the weather is awful for training outside, consider a strength block. Cut your endurance volume in half and triple your allocation to strength, 3 times a week for an hour. With a 6-week strength block done once a year and year-round maintenance, you will be ahead of 99% of the population. John's experience in a sidebar. For me, strength, agility, mobility are not a high priority and are optional. So I discussed that with the age group triathlete. My motto is not to sacrifice single discipline training for the gym. I put strength in the individual programs through swimming with resistance, biking hills and big gear, hill running, and plyometrics if they can tolerate it. Some love the gym, so that's fine. I think they get good mobility through swimming, in particular when including other strokes and tumble turns. Agility is not required so much unless you are elite for quick transitions. The next session is dosing agility, balance, and skill. It's a long game we are playing. Agility helps avoid accidents that accelerate age-related declines in performance. The possibilities for lifelong learning are endless. Surfing, skiing, wobble boards, single track, standing on one leg, putting your shoes on while balancing on one leg, skating, unicycle, swimming, hop, skip, jumping, throwing, catching, tennis, pickleball. An average of 1 hour a week. Have fun. Don't keep score. Build new skills. Once a year, cut your endurance volume in half, triple your allocation to agility, and learn a new skill. 3 times a week for an hour. Learning a new skill is a nice way to stay engaged in the fall while you work on the non-training aspects of your life. My experience is to increase my agility allocation in the winter when I ski with my kids. As we age, lack of agility will limit us more than declining VO2 max. Why? Injuries are what cause a step down in VO2 max and strength. So we enhance our performance by avoiding accidents and injuries. This also has implications for race selection, moving downhill at speed, certain types of group training, and choices that have a high risk of ruin. Certain environments come with a high risk of injury. Remember, we win by staying in the game. Mobility dose. Start with 10 minutes a day. Get started with this progression 3 cycles through. In the article, I linked a daily barefoot flexibility routine. It's really quick. It'll get you going, and it hits the key things, particularly for someone with tight lower legs and tight through the hips. My experience is that this barefoot routine was combined with the hip progression that I developed as an elite athlete. In the article, I link to an appendix from my prior book, Going Long, where you can see the hip progression. It works really well if you combine it and add the couch stretch from the book Ready to Run. And there's a video clip of that couch stretch linked in the article. Whatever protocol you use, mobility supports the training week. The mobility program should enhance recovery and relaxation, and the sessions should not increase fatigue. Make time to do a little daily. 2 times of the day are most beneficial. Immediately after training, by settling the nervous system and taking advantage of the muscles and connective tissue being warm, and at the end of the day, starting the process of preparing to sleep. With all of this stuff, some is better than none. Life happens. When we can't hit our normal routine, do a bit. Take the furthest parking spot, walk a flight of stairs, do a dozen bodyweight squats, pull up a mobility short on YouTube. The lower our volume, the more value we get from small doses. Maintain a little from each category in every week. More versus less is better than on versus off. Next section is a summary of the first framework. Be long-term greedy. What does this mean? Weekly, meet the minimum for lifelong basic fitness. The optimal program is the one we can repeat. We should judge the success of our approach by what happens afterwards. These ratios are an effective starting point. Endurance with an 8-to-1 split, strength for an hour, agility for an hour, mobility for an hour. In the third framework, we're going to dig deeply into how our program adapts for different events. Before doing that, I want to discuss a framework that supports everything. The second framework, metabolics. Throughout this section, I've linked videos, a selection of videos from my Metabolic Manifesto series on YouTube. The full series is available on YouTube. I picked the ones that are most relevant to the text. If we want to be fit, then we need to move more and more often than our governments and doctors recommend. The first framework laid out an average of 12 hours a week. That is a good starting point and a solid dose of movement, about 600 annual hours. To assess metabolic fitness, we recommend lactate testing. We have some ground to cover before it makes sense to dig into details. If you'd like to skip ahead, then you'll find a video presentation on my YouTube channel. Let's step back for a moment and consider athletic performance. Athletic performance is the ability to transform food to velocity. Our body's metabolic pathways perform this transformation. Endurance training improves our ability to metabolize efficiently. When our metabolic efficiency is high, our bodies are flexible with how moderately intense exercise is fueled. There's a lot to unwrap in the above statements. Let's consider the profile of a metabolically fit athlete. What does this individual look like? First, a wide endurance training zone, what we will call the green zone, also called Zone 1 easy pace and Zone 2 steady pace. Within the green zone, as well as Zone 3 moderately hard pace, there is an ability to use fat for fuel and ability to use lactate for fuel. Within their Zone 4 hard pace, there is an ability to perform high rates of work. What gets lost in popular discussion of fitness? There are 4 aspects. A wide green zone, number 1. Using fat for fuel, number 2. Using lactate for fuel, number 3. And finally, the ability for high rates of work. Everyone gets distracted by point number 4, high rates of work, and defaults to relative VO2 max as a proxy for work rate. This misses the point. Why? Because many experts can't eat their own cooking. They are unable to live their protocols. There is information in the many casualties to intensity-based programs. Number 2, because a focus on work rate is the final step in our endurance journey. Work rate training, also known as specific preparation, is a temporary place we visit, not one where we set up permanent home. Number 3, because VO2 max differences are a poor explanation for an individual's endurance performance. Each of us is better off optimizing for long-term volume. By optimizing the quantity of work over time, by absorbing our work, by working across the intensity spectrum. How are we going to do that? Lots of easy volume, specifically volume around what is called the first lactate threshold. Going forward, we will abbreviate the first lactate threshold as LT1. LT1 is the highest work rate an athlete can perform with blood lactate at baseline levels. We don't need to test lactate to apply the approaches in this book. However, the periodic testing will save us time. Paradoxically, we save the most time when we're the least experienced. What do we mean by that? Let's illustrate with a case study of my data. 2 years ago, I decided to come back to structured endurance training. I'm a past champion of several races, the most well-known being the Ultraman World Championships in Hawaii. I've been exercising most days since the mid-1990s. I know my body. I'm an expert on training protocols. I'm average height with an average build and a max heart rate about average for my age. You think I'd be able to use an off-the-shelf protocol and it would fit my physiology. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case for me, and it might not be for you. If you're unfamiliar with lactate testing, then you can skip over Figure 1. By the end of the book, we'll make sure you know how to interpret it. Figure 1 is a year's worth of lactate testing. And the vertical axis is lactate and the horizontal axis is watts. And the numbers that are in brackets is the heart rate, the maximum heart rate for a given power step. And there's 5 tests presented there over time. And gradually over time, you can see the curve is moving both down and to the right, demonstrating an increase in fitness, specifically metabolic fitness. The top red line is from my first bike test when I returned to structured training. The test shows a lack of metabolic fitness. As soon as I started increasing my work rate, measured in watts, my lactate started rising. This is called a linear lactate profile. Further into the test, at 30 to 40 beats below max, the effort felt steady, zone 2, but my lactate was elevated into my tempo zone, the area between zone 3 and zone 4 in common North American usage. This elevated lactate at low to moderate heart rates is a sign of poor metabolic fitness. My lack of metabolic fitness showed itself via post-workout fatigue and hunger. We don't need a lactate test to notice fatigue and hunger. If what feels like a moderate effort leaves you tired and ravenous, then I recommend you dig deeper. As my friend Alan Cousins says, test, don't guess. The next section is about targeting metabolic improvement. The most important tests we do as an endurance athlete are submax tests. Specifically, a progressive test that shows the first material uptick in blood lactate. The question we seek to answer: at what power, pace, and effort will lactate start to rise? We answer this question so we can aim green zone training at or under this point. We are going to share different case studies and explain testing protocols in detail. For now, let's continue with my 2022 data set and focus on locating LT1. Figure 2 is a data table from a bike and run testing day. Because the tests were sub-max, 2 tests were done on the same day. The bike test is the lower test in the figure, and it was done first. The bike test results: lactate starts to rise after the 160 watt step. The first material increase in lactate happens at 180 watts. So the first lactate threshold, LT1, is 160 watts. The maximum heart rate on the 160 watt step was 103 beats per minute. This was more than 60 beats below max. Cycling training prescription for metabolic improvement. Don't rev the engine. With a narrow green zone, rides need to be flat or indoors with careful attention paid to avoid spiking power, heart rate, and effort. Endurance training should aim around LT1, resulting in a ride average around LT1. Skew errors left. Going too easy is okay. We will get into detailed tips on execution with later chapters. For now, we want to ensure you know how to spot LT1 on the bike. Cycling LT1 is an essential intensity for targeting metabolic improvement. Run test, the upper test in the chart. The run profile in figure 2 is the most common one. The athlete has no easy zone for running. Lactate pops as soon as the athlete starts running, and the session quickly turns into a tempo workout, the border between zone 3 and zone 4. All running at any speed is metabolically stressful. Athletes with this profile should use cycling as the primary sport for improving metabolic fitness. Run training prescription for metabolic improvement. Run easy. Regardless of heart rate, assume all running is stressful. Focus on short, frequent runs. Keep runs flat. These protocols are going to feel too easy. Comfortable training is sustainable, and it's going to take a while to move the needle. The next section asks and answers. How much volume to move the needle? Remember the 8-to-1 ratio above? It referred to the intensity mix between green zone and everything else in our endurance training mix. Here's a prediction. You're going to be worried about the wrong things. First, worried that you're going too easy. Not possible. Second, worried that you're not getting enough intensity. You probably have more than you realize. What you should be focused on is, am I getting enough green zone volume to move the needle? Number one, at some point, you will need to boost the amount of endurance work. We will get into specific workload requirements when we discuss athlete types and their basic weeks. Second, the amount of work required will not be tolerated if it's solely run-focused. Cycling provides a well-tolerated exercise option. As a developing athlete, think about 90-minute blocks of continuous aerobic training. Make sure there are 2 back-to-back easy days in every week. That leaves up to 5 training days for the week. These duration targets should be interpreted based on current capacity. A, 2 maintenance days of 90 minutes each. B, 2 loading days of 2 to 3 hours each. C, 1 long day of 3 to 6 hours. D, if more recovery is needed, take extra easy days. Reduce endurance intensity targets. Go even easier. The above structure will give 10 to 15 hours of training in the core training week. At the beginning, there will be limited capacity for high-intensity training. That's okay. Race-specific work will come later. For now, focus on racking up green zone volume, strength training, and quickness training. Quickness being skill-based, short duration, speed sessions, such as strides. The next section is nutrition for metabolic gains. Key things. If we are training at the low end of our aerobic profile, for durations under 2 hours, then real food and water will do the trick. Resist the urge to pour liquid sugar down the throat. If you're overdoing it with the sports nutrition products, then you will find you are gaining fat while adding training volume. So save the sports nutrition for longer days. Even then, break up longer days so you have the ability to fuel with real food choices. Train your gut to tolerate eating all macros, protein, fat, and carbohydrate across the longer days. There's a linked video that walks you through my best advice for nutrition. And there's a link in the article that takes you to the nutrition section of the Endurance Essentials Substack. When the time comes to push volume, training performance comes first. Sports nutrition product usage increases, meaning a slight increase in body weight is normal and to be expected. Stable weight is a hallmark of effective nutrition. The next section is timelines and tips. With our primary focus on green zone endurance, strength, and quickness, how long is it going to take to see results? Well, the changes start immediately, but it's going to take several hundred days to feel the difference. In Figure 1, repeated below, you can see the improvement across the entire year in my case study. However, it took that entire year before I could feel the improvement. This is the nature of day-to-day change. The shifts are very small, very gradual. For this reason, gathering sub-max data year-round and generating evidence that the plan is working will be a wise choice. In the figure, the lower red line is the profile of a well-trained amateur athlete. So I went from a linear profile to what's called a normal curve. There is a long baseline showing a wide green zone. There is a lower heart rate for any given power than the initial test. Power, 1 millimole above baseline, has shifted from 185 watts to 245 watts. Now that we have a well-trained amateur profile to work with, let's dig into the data tables and highlight what you are seeking with your own testing. Figure 3 is a data table after a year of metabolic focus. There's a bike test on the left side and a run test on the right side. The bike test is now effectively a long warm-up for the athlete. It's a sub-max test. There's 60 minutes of cycling before lactate begins to increase, and the heart rate at LT1 is now higher, corresponding to a much greater power output. Meaning the work rate of easy pace has increased. While it feels like you will be going easy forever, that's not the case. As metabolic fitness develops, our easy pace gets faster and faster. Additionally, volume is better and better tolerated. So overall, more work can be done. In the run test on the right-hand side, different from the first run test, lactate drops when exercise begins. This is what we want to see. Lactate stays low across the early part of the test, and the top of easy pace now requires some effort. Easy pace no longer feels easy. Further testing tips are in the video linked below, as well as in the linked lactate presentation. Summary of the second framework. With your plan, build your protocol so you get enough green zone volume to move the needle. Enhance adaptation with superior recovery, not adding intensity. The 3 key ones: sleep, nutrition, and unstructured time. Focus on compound load. Stack the weeks, months, and seasons. Resist the urge to constantly push short-term load. Keep what works. Notice and remove errors. On to the third framework, work capacity. We are a balanced athlete now. Congratulations are in order. We've achieved the health and functional benefits of exercise by using the first 2 frameworks. As we shift our focus towards athletic performance, it's important to stay in touch with the first 2 frameworks. Health and metabolic fitness are the foundation upon which our competitive careers are built. Figure 4 is a performance pyramid. At the bottom, there's the ability to move for the duration of the event. The next level up is the ability to do the work required for the event. The next level above that is work rate training. And at the top of the pyramid is competition, the races themselves. I recommend when you look at the pyramid, you consider 3 different lenses: time, duration, and work. The different views are helpful when you consider different race distances. So that first level, the ability to move. My experience. The longest race I ever finished was Ultraman Hawaii. Round numbers, it was 8 hours a day for 3 consecutive days. For that event, I needed to make sure I could move all day, 3 days in a row. There's no getting around this reality. Or take a marathon. The average finishing time is about 4 hours. An average finisher needs the capacity to move for 4 hours. Absent the ability to move for race duration, fitness doesn't matter. Let's restate this important point. If we are unprepared for the duration, then it does not matter how fast we are. This brings up an essential part of training prescription. Start by asking the question, am I ready for the duration of my goal event? If the answer is not yet, then stick with the second framework and build green zone endurance, particularly the long day. Be aware that anyone with a training plan to sell is not going to tell you this essential bit of information. Keep repeating what's been working while you gradually build overall endurance. Isn't going to make them any money. Duration. Let's look at the reality of duration another way, from the viewpoint of fatigue. That program you're considering applying to your event. Where does my program generate the bulk of its fatigue? What are the sessions that break me down and require extended recovery? Our capacity to recover is limited. Are we using our energy in a way that directly benefits race performance or builds the capacity to do the training required for race performance? Capacity shifts us from a time viewpoint towards considering the work required for our event. The next section is minding the gap. I'll explain what I mean by that. Here's a simple checklist to assess the gap between our goal event and our current reality. Number 1, have you ever stood for the duration of your goal event? That'll sound silly for a 5K, but it's a very relevant question for an event like an Ironman. Have you ever moved for the duration? Based on last month, how many days does it take you to train the equivalent of your goal event? A, take your training time from last month. B, convert to hours and minutes per day. C, compare it to your race day. Consider the gap between average daily load and likely race duration. The wider the gap, the lower the training intensity will need to be. When you are pushing duration, you will need to back off the pace. Multisport athletes. Look at total time and distance by sport. The multiple or fraction of race distance completed each week gives valuable insight into the humility you must display with race pacing. Runners, your job is easier. Look at weekly mileage and remember all mileage counts. Walk, hike, run, you name it. Everyone, judge fitness by what happens after loading. When we push duration, how long does it take to return to normal training? The depth of our fitness is determined by our ability to back it up following our key endurance days. The next section is work before work rate. After we have proven ability to move, we move on to ability to do work. For most races, this implies fitting the work equivalent of the goal event into a single day or longer period. For running, distance is a good proxy for work. For swimming, relaxed, continuous swimming of goal distance is a good proxy for work. For cycling, kilojoules are our preferred method to track work. We call this big day training, and the principle applies from our first 10K through to Ultraman triathlons. The big day workout is a series of sessions, intervals, and meals spread across a block of time. As endurance improves, more work can be fit into the big day. Let's recap. First, create the ability to move for event duration. Next, demonstrate that work capacity is close to event requirements. We're still not trying to get fast, but we sure as heck will be improving with all this focus on our general capacity. Many approaches invert the pyramid and skip the essential apprenticeship where work capacity is built. The more time we give ourselves to prepare, the faster we will race. We share our approaches to work rate training in the sport-specific chapters. The fourth framework is time. Races are won at the end and at key moments across their total duration. Pacing is about more than pace. It requires the capacity to choose, change, and sustain a given work rate. When we set out to build our specific capacity, we should do so with the entire race duration in mind. For example, let's take the capacity to run a fast 10K. This capacity can have many different meanings. For a 10K runner, it means what it says. For a marathoner, the capacity is required in the second half of their event. For an elite long-distance triathlete, the capacity is required after 7 hours of exercise. For a competitive standard distance triathlete, the capacity is required after a 1,500 meter swim and a 40K bike. And the list could go on. Specific capacities must be prepared with an understanding of the time and conditions in which they will be required. Ultraman is an event that's all about time. Day 1, 10K swim, 145K bike. Day 2, 274K bike. Day 3, double marathon. Day 1 is not just about completing a 10,000 meter swim. It's about the ability to do a 145K hilly time trial after that swim. Similarly, day 3 is not merely a double marathon. The final day requires the ability to do a double marathon after 2 massive days of racing. In building your plan, consider the role that time will play on race day. Pay careful attention to your performance at the end of your workouts. Be strong at the end. Against all the noise you'll hear in the endurance training space, I hope you'll return to these frameworks: basic fitness, metabolics, work capacity, and the role of time. They will serve us well over the years it takes to reach our full potential. Let's keep the fun in our programs. Remember that volume is a good explanation, and stay in the game. Thanks for listening to Chapter 1.